technical session on Blender, and it's being taken by Madhu Shravan Murli. He is an architect and he has a specialization in design, that is a master's in design, and he is specialized in product design. And today he'll be doing mainly a 101 or breaking the ice with Blender. And at e-Yantra, he has been associated for over a year now, and he determines the creator side of the project. Hope you have a great session today. Over to you.
Hi, let me know if you guys can hear my voice with a thumbs up on the chat.
We can hear you.
All right, cool. Thank you, Pavitran. Thank you. Okay, so just to get a heads on how many people are here. So could you just tell me on the chat like why are you guys interested in Blender or learning Blender? And what your experience is learning like starting with Blender. Are you complete beginners or have you started working with it, or do you find it a little difficult to understand? So yeah, let me know. And I also want to know like which one of you is the youngest over here? Is anybody here from school? Okay, Purav says he's a beginner. All right. Vipul is also beginner. Great. All right, so a lot of you are beginners over here. I think that is the reason why you guys have like signed up for this ice breaking with Blender session. So the first and foremost thing that we have to do is basically install Blender. So have you guys installed Blender onto your system? Uh, or is there any issue while installing? You can type your answers on the chat. So some time I'm going to start sharing my screen, so then I can show you what Blender is like. But have you guys installed Blender onto your system about now or not? Okay, Vipul says he hasn't installed it. So all right. So we'll quickly go through how to install Blender, and then so recommend that you guys install Blender. And during this session, I might go fast and slow sometimes. So I would recommend all of you to basically have a pen and a paper with you so that you can write down all the shortcuts or some main points uh, through running Blender. All right. And in the end of the session, we're going to have a small quiz based on which you will get some scoring, all right, which might or might not have rewards. Um, so, yeah, please keep a note of all of this and let me start sharing my screen, all right? Give me 1 second. So let me know if you can see my screen. Cool. So this is a web browser, like any other web browser. So here you go to blender.org. Okay, reload. Oh. And Right now here you see the website keeps on changing. So Blender, because it's a open source software, it has a lot of new releases throughout the year. And on the top of the website, you're going to go to downloads, and over there you have version 3.3.1 LTS. LTS stands for long-term support. What this means is it is going to be so basically, because Blender keeps on releasing a lot of versions, uh, in some of the versions it is Blender promises to give you a long-term support. So that is what a LTS stands for. So it is 231 MB. So if you click on it, it will start downloading. Uh, and yeah, you basically download all of this, and then you click on it and go through the installation setup, whatever it makes you go through. So do that now. Till then, I will go through the website and show you what other things Blender can do. Meanwhile, I want each one of you to basically go and install Blender. All right. So I'm going to click cancel over here because I have already installed Blender. So you guys can go ahead and save it. And then once that is done, you can keep moving ahead. So I'm going to wait for like 2 minutes or 3 minutes, and then I'm going to go ahead. All right. So let me talk about Blender a little bit more. So, okay, so you're at a very good time. Uh, this session has been placed in a very good time because Blender usually has a Blender conference every year. And this year it is happening at this moment. So it has started yesterday, and it's going to go for another couple of days. So if you basically click on this icon, you can see there are a lot of other languages over there, but it gives you a glimpse of what Blender conference does. So, and on top of this, if you go to YouTube and then type Blender conference 22. So yeah, so here you can see the person, uh, 20 years of Blender. So this person is the founder of Blender. So please go through everything that Blender has to offer. So you can even follow the Blender page, subscribe to it, and then it will keep giving you a lot of other benefits later on also. It also basically tells you about the new technologies on how the artists around the world use Blender, and the tips and tricks they keep sharing. All right. So I'm gonna go back. Uh, there are other things over here, free and open source. Let me just close this. Cool. So all of this might overwhelm you, but don't worry about it. Today is all about crossing that first hurdle and making Blender and working towards getting familiarized with Blender. All right. Cool. So I'm gonna go ahead and open up Blender. So let me know if you can uh, see Blender. All right. Let me know if you see Blender or not. Or let me share again. Can you see my Blender screen? All right, cool. So, so once you install Blender, it's gonna look something like this. And yeah, so this is the splash screen. So this box right in the center. Splash screen basically features artwork made by some kind of an artist, and so they artist's credit are down below. And basically, what this symbolizes is every time Blender releases a new feature, uh, it releases an experimental phase of it, and some artists around the world they kind of use it to create some kind of a 3D model or an illustration out of it. So this year, I think it's geometry nodes, and they are using this particular artist over here. Uh, use geometry nodes to create this artwork, and hence Blender used it on its splash screen. All right. So if you click outside, the splash screen goes away, and the first thing that you will see in Blender is uh, there's a cube, there's a camera, and then there is a light. But before all of that, let me show you, let me make you understand what Blender, uh, like the interface of Blender looks like. All right. Let me just go to window and toggle full screen. All right. So I hope everything is full screen at the moment. Okay. Before doing anything in Blender, I want you to go to edit, go to preferences, and we're going to set some preferences. All right. So in interface, uh, there's something called resolution scale. So if you click and drag left and right, you can change the scale of how big the icons are going to look like, or how big the text is going to look. All right. So I'm going to put it at 1.2. That seems like a fairly decent text size for me. Uh, and also because some of our participants, they might be watching this video on their phones. All right. So it would help them. The other thing is I want you to go to navigation. In navigation, you're gonna click on these options: orbit around selection, depth, perspective will already be selected, so you click on depth, and zoom to mouse position. All right. These are important because these help you navigate through the 3D space. So if your Blender behaves differently than mine, it is because these settings are not turned on. So you have to take care of all of this. All right. Uh, you can directly close it. Otherwise, see my auto save. If I click on this hamburger icon at the bottom left, you see auto save is turned on for me. So that basically means I can close this preference window, and then all my settings are already saved. All right. Cool. So now let's talk about the user interface of Blender. So the first thing you'll see is obviously there is a title, the top bar over here. It has this icon. It basically brings back the splash screen if you want. The top left one, we don't have anything to do with it. The file menu, edit, renders, Windows, help. So these are pretty generic. So every software is going to have all of these menus over there. All right. Then we have these tabs. Okay. So these tabs are called workspaces. So what these workspaces do is, let me just move this around. These workspaces, they give you kind of a separate kind of layouts. All right. So there's a layout workspace also. Uh, so if you go, so I'll show you a difference between the layout workspace and the modeling workspace. So a layout workspace is something like this. It has panels. Okay. Every workspace is going to have panels. A panel is basically rectangles starting from one end to the other. So this is one panel. This is another panel. This is another panel. This is another panel. So you can resize these panels. Okay. I can click and drag on these things, these divisions, and then I can resize these panels in the workspace. If I go to, so over here, there is a panel which is horizontal, which is equivalent to, which is of the size of the 3D workspace. If I go to modeling, you see that workspace, the panel at the bottom has gone away. So basically what workspaces do is they give you a streamlined way of uh, working throughout your project. Okay. Uh, so in a layout, what is the layout workspace usually used for? It is used for laying out all your 3D models, making a 3D scene, and modeling is basically to model one particular asset. Sculpting, it changes all your options. It moves away the bottom one. It and all of that. UV editing, it gives you two separate panels. One is a UV editor and all of that. I'll show you other things. So there are many workspaces over there. All right. So let's go back to layout. Uh, Let me pull this down and make it like this. Uh, uh, you can see my screen, right? No? Yeah. One second. Let me share my screen again. Yeah. So I hope you guys can see my screen again.
Yeah.
Yeah. So let me just move this about. Cool. So, so I was talking about workspaces. These are all workspaces. Workspaces consist of panels. Okay. So in the layout workspace, there is one, two, three, and four panels. In the modeling workspace, there is one, two, and three panels. All right. But that does not mean that you cannot customize it according to your preferences. Even if you you use, if you can see, there is a plus sign also. If you right click on any of the workspace tabs, like the modeling one, you can say duplicate, and then it is going to create a version of the workspace which you are comfortable with, and then you can edit it according to your preferences. All right. So let me do one thing in the layout one. Let me create a duplicate. Now it says layout 0.001. So let me rename it by double clicking it and call it Blender session. All right. Uh, Blender session. Now now you guys might not be able to see it, but there is a WebEx window which is popping up in my screen. So I'm gonna rearrange all of this. So I want to make a new panel between like at the bottom of these two panels. So while I am in like hovering on the division between this panel and this panel, my cursor changes to up and down arrows. Okay, that is basically the cursor is telling me you can drag it up and down right now. I can right click, and then it tells me, gives me a few options. It gives me vertical split, horizontal split. So let me say horizontal split. And now I'm moving my cursor. I'm not clicking or anything. I'm just moving my cursor. And then I feel like I want to place my division, a new division over here. So I'm going to click on it. And now you see there is a new panel that has come to this space. Now this workspace, this Blender session workspace, which I just created, it has one, two, three, four, five panels. All right. So I'm gonna move this hovering panel to which you can't see, but I can see it on one side. I'm gonna make this like so, and I can change this. I'll tell you what that is. Oh, one second. What that top left button does. So I'm going to keep one panel at the bottom right like that so that I can keep my WebEx window over there. All right. Okay, let's talk about what panels do. Uh, so if every panel basically represents an editor. So Blender is made out of these editors, which you have to use to create whatever you want for Blender. So editors basically can be found on the top left. So this is basically what controls the entire panel. Okay. So right now, you can see a 3D object over here, a camera and a light. All right. So you are basically viewing a 3D viewport editor. All right. So a 3D viewport editor, if you click on it, it's going to give you so many editors over here. And these editors are basically categorized according to the workflow that they support. So a general is basically 3D viewport. We are currently in 3D viewport. There are other things over here also, image editor, UV editor, compositor. So we are not going to go through all of these. We are here to basically understand only the beginnings of the Blender workflow. So we are at the 3D viewport editor. Okay. So the other side, if you go to this panel has uh, a tree-like structure icon over here. So if you click on it, it basically is the outliner editor. All right. It is called an outliner. So like the name suggests, it basically consists of all the objects in your 3D scene. Okay. So if you click on the cube gets selected. If you click on the camera gets selected, and so on and so forth. So if you keep adding more geometry or more information to the 3D viewport, more of the information keeps getting added to your outline over here. Okay, so this is basically a management tool more than anything else, and then it gives you options like I don't like hide and unhide the cube like that. Okay, and lights to be turned on and off or to be seen in the viewport or not. So things like that are possible in the outliner. Below the outliner, we have the properties editor. This is again over here, just below the outliner over here. And what properties does, if you select any of the assets or any of the element in the 3D viewport, it is going to give you all the properties associated with that uh, object or that element. Okay. Now, I want you to understand one concept very clearly. In the Blender 3D workspace, there are objects and there are elements. So this is also an element, this is also an element, but this is a 3D object or a mesh. We can call it a mesh, and this is a camera. So a camera will never get rendered per se, and a light will never get rendered, but it provides you more other qualities, and meshes are basically the things which are going to get rendered. For now, I want you to understand there are different typologies of elements which is available to be put into the 3D space to work with. Okay. I hope you guys are getting it. So give me a thumbs up if you guys are following all these things. All right. Thank you, Vipul. Yeah. Cool. So now we understand what properties are. So we're gonna go in depth in some time. I'm just giving you an introduction of all these editors. All right. This you don't have to understand at the moment. So I created this so that I can put my WebEx window to the bottom right. Now this is if you click on it, it is the symbol is like of a clock. So if I see, let me do that. It's called a timeline. So when is a timeline used in animations is to animate things. Okay, so basically you can animate object from of an object from moving one place to another if you want to, but that is a little complex, so we're not going to go there in this session. So maybe in the next session we might do that. But uh, in this session, we're going to cover how to create 3D models and how to render them so that we can at least create still images by the end of all of this. All right. So cool. So since we are not going to use the uh, timeline editor or the panel timeline editor, so it is advisable that we remove it from our workspace. So how do we do that? So if we go to the division between this panel and this panel, uh, once again the cursor changes its shape from up and down, basically telling us that you can drag it up and down if you want to. So I'm gonna right click on it and it says join area. All right, so I'm gonna click join area, and basically now I have to tell Blender that I want the top panel to overtake the lower panel. So I click on the lower panel. So wherever you click, that panel goes away. So I want this panel to go away. So I'm going to click here, and then the uh, timeline timeline panel has gone. Okay. Not to worry, you can still bring it back. If you go to any corner and then you see the cursor changes from a pointer to a plus like that, no, like a crosshair. So if you click and drag, it creates a new panel like that out of thin air, and it basically creates the same panel. So you see, this is also a 3D viewport, and this is also a 3D viewport. Okay, but you can change it to a timeliner if you want a timeline like this. Cool. So, and one other shortcut to basically merge areas or editors or panels together is going to the corners again. Just make sure you're in the right on the side of the panel which you want to merge with the other one. So like that, and then click and drag, and it will overtake the panel where you're going to click and drag. I hope that you guys understood. Cool. So this is the workspace which I created. It's called a Blender session because it is a Blender session for you guys. Uh, so navigation. Let's go through the navigation of the thing. Let me just add a. Okay, this is a good way of showing you one thing. Give me 1 second. Okay. Mm. Okay, so this might be a good opportunity to basically show you how to install add-ons. So I'm going to install an add-on which basically helps create shape keys. Sorry, screencast keys. All right. So let me just move this around a bit. Cool. Uh, if I go to edit, I go to preferences. So by now you must understand कि Blender preferences is something where you need to spend a little time and basically uh, turn on and off a few things. Okay. So there is a panel called add-ons over here. All right. There is an option over here called add-ons. So once you click on it, it's going to give you all these additional add-ons which are already inbuilt in Blender, but they are turned off. Okay. Why they are turned off is because it allows Blender to load faster when you turn it on, or when you double click on it and you open it, it loads faster that ways. So you basically everything is turned off. Uh, so you can turn it on according to your preferences. I'm gonna look for screen cast keys. Okay, so there is a add-on called screencast keys. So this is specific to my preferences. I have installed it separately, all right? So you might not be able to see this on your uh, Blender, but this is how you turn on add-ons, okay? So then, oh, let me just show you what it does. So there is a small arrow on the top right over here. So if you click on it, it's going to give you all of that. So let me just turn this on. So, and let me make this a little bigger. Oh, and center align. All right. So I hope you guys can now see my shortcuts. Whatever I click, uh, I hope you can see my screen's keys, which like whatever I'm pressing, you guys can now see properly. All right, cool. So that should help. Let me tell you a little bit more about add-ons. I think I deviated a bit. So in add-ons, if there is some add-on which is not in the uh, list that you have uh, provided, so you have to basically install it separately. So for that, what happens? Generally, what happens is any add-on, it comes in a zip format, .zip. Okay. So you download that and then you click on in you open Blender, you go to preferences, you go to add-ons, you go to install, and then make your way to wherever that zip file is. For example, this is the zip file. You click on it and then say install add-on, and then you search over here like screencast. Then it is going to show you that add-on is been installed, and then you have to enable it. Okay, so every add-on is a little different. There will be minor tweaks here and there. So that is how you install add-ons in Blender. Okay, some add-ons are pre inbuilt from the beginning, and some add-ons are not. Okay, now let's go back to our this thing. So every editor is swappable. So I can turn, uh, 1 second. I'll have to make a new window for something else. All right. Okay, cool. So I made another window because WebEx has another window on the top right. Maybe you are not able to see it, but I can. Uh, all right. So here you can swap one editor into the other editor also. So for example, in the outliner, I can click on the outliner and I can turn it into a 3D viewport. Now this doesn't look like this, but if you basically move about, you see, it basically gives me the 3D information which is required. All right. It This panel also gives me the same thing, and this panel also gives me the same thing. Let me turn it back into an outliner. So that is how easy it is to basically swap one editor into the other. Okay, so you can do that. The other shortcut which is sometimes useful is if you're hovering in some 3D in some panel like this, if you press Control Spacebar, it is going to expand that particular panel and consume the entire screen. Okay, and to exit, you basically press Control Spacebar again, and then it exits from that entire thing. So I can do that here also. So you can see the entire outliner over here. Cool. So this is a few things which are over there. So now that we understand editors, so in our Blender session editor, we have 3D viewport, we have the outliner, okay, we have the properties. And we're going to work in these three editors only to make a simple uh, simple model. All right. So the first thing we need to understand a little bit about our 3D viewport editor. All right. So if you wanna like see about or orbit about things, you use the middle mouse button and then you basically drag and then you can basically orbit around stuff. So because we have also enabled a lot of our preferences, if you go here, preferences and navigation, it says zoom to mouse position, it says orbit around selection. So these two things, they help us navigate also. So I can zoom to one particular position if I want to, like this. Okay. And if I click on it, so that particular point becomes the center of uh, the orbiting scene. Okay. If I hold this, then that becomes the center. So these are a few things which basically help. There's something called panning happens is clicking and dragging middle mouse button while pressing shift. Okay, I'm pressing shift on my keyboard plus middle mouse button. So you can basically pan around like this. Okay, so we understood orbiting, panning, zooming is fairly simple. You are basically using the wheel up and wheel down to zoom in and out. All right. So that's about it. Nothing more. So sometimes maybe your wheel is not there, or maybe you guys are using a trackpad. So how do you do all these mouse op operations when you're with a trackpad? So basically, on the right, you see there are like uh, four buttons on the right. So if you click on the magnifying icon and click and drag it up and down. So you can magnify it up and down. I'm clicking and dragging, okay? Left click and drag. Uh, in the pan also, click and drag, move it in any direction. It doesn't matter if your cursor basically hits the edge of the panel, basically it will still read. So I'm just moving towards the right and it will still keep moving towards the right to infinity. All right. So and this is a camera icon. Basically what it does is it gives you a view of what the camera is seeing. So if you click on it, this is what the camera is looking at. It is looking at the cube from this angle. Okay, if you click on it again, it's gonna come out of that. And this is basically showing you perspective and orthographic. Uh, I hope you know what perspective and orthographic is. So I'll just show you a demonstration. So this is orthographic, okay? On the top left, if you see, it also gives you in writing, it says user orthographic. Okay, user is me. I am the person. I'm looking through my perspective. I am not looking through the camera perspective, and the view is orthographic. What does orthographic actually mean? I'll tell you in a bit. And if I click on it again, it says user perspective like this. So I'll show you what perspective basically means. So the reason, if you've seen railway track and you're standing on the railway track, and if you keep looking at the track, you see that they tend to converge when they're further away, right? So that is perspective in short term. Uh, well, now look at these two boxes. Now, these two boxes are basically of the same dimensions. So this is also 2 meter wide. This is again 2 meter wide. But this box looks bigger and this box looks smaller. So this is what perspective basically means. Things which are closer to us appear bigger, and things which are further away from us are smaller. All right. So what happens in orthographic? Orthographic, this is how we, in perspective is how we perceive the actual world. That is how we perceive depth. All right. But in orthograph, now suddenly every dimension is the same. So the front, it is very difficult to distinguish which uh, object is in the front, which object is at the back. So they all of them have the same kind of dimensions. Okay, this is also 2 meters, this is also 2 meters. So this is what orthographic means. Usually orthographic we use in situations where we want to understand the dimensions of object, and nothing more than that. Only when engineering and specific, very accurate dimensions are required, that is when we use orthographic. Or it could be a style, design style, maybe. Like whenever you play, if you played any games like Lego or Tetris, they could be considered orthographic. Cool. So this is perspective again. So yeah, so on, it's a good time to show you. So we are in the 3D viewport. So, and I've shown you how to navigate through all these scenes, all right? You can click on things and all of that. Okay, now remember I've told you that in the 3D viewport, there are different elements. There is a 3D mesh. There is a camera, which is not a mesh, but it adds to the information in the 3D viewport. There is a light, which adds information to the mesh. So there are a lot of typologies of elements over there. Okay. So right next to the editor button over here, we have something called the object mode. Okay. So if I click on this, which is a light, so I get only one option, object mode. If I click on the camera, again, object mode. But when I go to this mesh, when I click on the mesh, you see there are so many different modes available for me. Okay. Now think about it a little. Uh, so only 3D meshes have so many options. It is because I'll show you in the outliner. Let me expand it by pressing Control Spacebar. Okay, I hope you can see this. So the cube which we have, it is made out of vertices. Okay, so uh, so this is the camera. Camera is made out of camera. Light is made out of light. But a cube is made out of vertices and material. Okay, this I will make you understand a little further away, but understand this. uh 3D mesh is made out of vertices, edges, and faces. So let me click on this. Like this is how it is highlighted. There is a orange outline around this. Okay. Let me click on this and click edit mode. So now we have entered into edit mode, and you have clearly seen that something has happened. Okay. So many new options have arrived. Let me go back to object mode. Okay. Now the options have been reduced over here. So as soon as I go into edit mode, these new options also come. So what is all of this? Okay. I'll show you a few things. So right next to edit mode, there are three other buttons. This is called vertex select. This is called edge select. And this is a face select. According to which option is selected over here, you see the interface of the cube also changes. Okay. If I don't know if you can see, but you can see that there is a black dot on every vertex area, like wherever the edges are meeting. Once I go into the edge mode, those vertices have gone away. Okay. Once I'm in the face mode, they're also gone, uh, and all of that. Okay. Let me select the vertex mode. So basically, I can select these points. Okay. If I go close to any of these points and click once, it gets selected like this. And it is highlighted by this white thing, and then orange fading effect has come. If I press shift and then select another vertex, you see two vertices have been selected simultaneously. Continuing that, if I do this, now you see there is a slight orange tint on the top face over here. All right. So you can select multiple objects by pressing shift. The last one which you select is the most active vertex, like it is the last active vertex basically, and that is highlighted in white, while everything else is highlighted in uh, orange. Okay, you can keep going on selecting like that. Now you see uh, these two faces have been selected. Okay, why is that happening? So you need to understand a face, at least in the cube's case, if you want to select the entire face, like face is basically the surface, you have to select this vertex, 3 and 4. These four vertices you have to select to basically select the face. So while in vertex select mode, I'm pressing shift 1, 2, 3, and once I've clicked this, the face also gets selected. Cool. I'm going to click outside to cancel out all of that. Let's see what happens in the case of edge selection. If I want to select the face, I can click on this edge. I'm pressing shift 2, 3, 4. Again, the face is being selected. The entire face is selected. All right. I hope you're trying understanding the concept of uh, vertices, edges, and faces. Okay. And in face select mode, all you have to do is select which face you want to. So all you have to do is click on it. Okay. And the entire face is going to get selected all at the same time. So when I select this face and I go into uh, the vertex select mode, you see automatically all these four vertices are selected. All right. So vertices, two vertices, when they're joined together, they make an edge. When edges get joined together, at least three of them, they make a face. Okay. Cool. So now we understand what a 3D mesh is comprised of. A 3D mesh is comprised of vertices, edges, and faces. It can also have the ability to store material data. Okay, that is why there is uh, material data over here. Okay, we are going to come to that in some time. Once we add material to our cube, we will see that the how Blender leverages this command over here. All right, so I've told you about meshes and all of this. So now you know a little bit about all of these things. So uh, I'll show you what these commands are. Okay. So first one is select box. So if you long press on it, it gives you all these other options also. I have, if you look at my, so keep an eye on this virtual mouse, okay, at the bottom. I haven't left my left mouse button still, and I'm still hovering around till I select something. So select box is selected. So basically what it tells me, I can select multiple things at the same time. So if I want to select all the three things, I can basically create a box around it, and then this gets selected. Okay. What is the other thing? Circle select. So I can basically click and drag, and wherever the circle touches, it gives me, it selects that uh, into the selection group. Okay, and then there is a lasso. Basically, I can do this. I want only this or these two or these three. Lasso. Cool. Then there is this 3D cursor. Okay, 3D cursor is very interesting. It is very unique to Blender. So if I click on 3D cursor, you see something is happening. So this 3D cursor is basically uh, somewhere in the center. So it is designed in a way that you ignore it mostly. Okay. It is a red and white circle with something like that. But if you have 3D cursor selected and you click somewhere, it moves from the center to wherever you have clicked last. Okay. And that keeps happening all the time. Unless you click on something else, then it stops moving. So let me put it back in the center. I'm going to show you what that shortcut is. Okay. Now move. This is called moving. So you click on something, and then if you click on move, then you can basically move the object left and right, up and down, things like that. Okay. I'll so this is all fine, all right. But the best way to learn Blender, in my opinion, is basically by learning shortcuts. So this is where your pen and paper is going to come in handy. Okay, you can basically hide and unhide this toolbar by pressing T. So T basically hides and unhides your toolbar. Now, for example, so now I've hidden all this. I want to move this cube to some direction, maybe in the X direction, maybe in the Y direction, maybe in the Z direction. So how do I do that? Oh, before all of this, so if you see there are like, because this is a 3D object, uh, oh, give me 1 second. Yeah. So this is a 3D environment, right? So what does 3D actually mean? It has 3 dimensions. So the x-axis, y-axis, and z-axis. So if you look at this, this is a gizmo. If you want to orbit around and you're using a trackpad, you basically have to click and drag on the gizmo, and it is going to orbit around all of this. Cool. This is how it works. Is the same with middle mouse button, so you don't have to bring your mouse all the way if you have a mouse. Uh, you don't have to bring your pointer all the way to the gizmo to basically move up and down. So you see, in a 3D workspace, there are 3 dimensions: the X dimension, the Y dimension, and the Z dimension. So X is symbolized as red line, Y is green, and Z is blue. So basically, this is how I remember. RGB is XYZ. Okay. Uh, R is for red. RGB. ठीक है, all right. So this is how you know. And obviously, the minus X's are over there. Uh, cool. So I want to move this. Before moving or doing anything, we need to understand the unit system in Blender. Uh, because this is a 3D environment, there is some units involved somewhere. So what are these units? I'm going to show you right now. So in the properties panel, so there are a lot of, let's understand a little bit about the properties panel. Let me expand it a bit. So I've expanded the properties panel using my control space. Right, it's not helping now. Let me make this a little bigger. Okay. In my properties panel, what is happening? There are, so just as there are layouts, so many layouts, there are tabs, right? These are all tabs. Uh, so in properties also, there are tabs over here. So there are many tabs associated in the properties panel. Now, because I've chosen a cube, I've selected a cube, these additional tabs have also appeared. So as soon as I deselect the cube uh, or select something else, you see some options have gone away. If I go select the cube again, uh, you see some additional options have come. So basically the properties keep changing according to what you have selected. So let's go to this fourth tab, which is the scene properties. So if you keep hovering on it, it will tell you what tab that is. It is called scene property. In scene property, there is something called units right over here. So if you click on it, it says metric. It says 1 point so many zeros are there, and then degrees, meters, kilograms, seconds, Kelvin. So basically over here in the scene tab in units division, you can basically determine the unit in which you want to work with. So architects usually work in millimeters, uh, but by default, the units of Blender in which Blender works is in meters. All right. So what does that mean? Let me show you. Okay. So you see there is a grid on. Hello.
Can't see your shared content.
Yeah, let me just share again. Hi, is this better?
Yes.
Yeah, sorry, I lost you guys for a second. Uh, all right, sorry about that delay. So basically, I was showing that this is, so there is a grid, right? And that grid is 1 meter by 1 meter. All right. So that is what it is. So given that logic, this cube is, how big is this cube? If anybody can write on the chat, how big is the cube? Like the size of the cube. Anyone? Can you see my screen? Yes, 2 meters by 2 meters, correct. So, so this cube is 2 meter by 2 meter. So so over here, if you come, there is a measure tool. So you can click and drag, and you can basically measure this, and it is going to give you something similar to that. So if you press Control, okay, it starts snapping to the edges, okay. So Control plus dragging gives you a snapping mechanism. If you know what snapping is, it basically joins to the corners or to the vertices. So 2 meters, right? So if you click on it, it goes away. So it hasn't really gone away. It's basically you have changed the tool, so you don't see it anymore. But it's going to be there. Uh, All right. So this is a cube. I want to move it in the positive x direction, 2 meters. So how do I do that? So I can basically use this tool, but what I usually do, let's say we don't have this tool, so I press T to make them hide. So the shortcut is called grab. So if I press G, so I'm not, so my mouse is over here, all right. So I'm not pressing anything on my mouse. So it has, the object has locked itself to the mouse cursor's position. So if I move my mouse, the object is also moving. But I want to move it only in the X direction. So if I press X, so it gets constrained to only X direction like this. So if you see top left of my screen, it basically gives you the dimension in which the thing is moving. So if I move on this direction, so see minus the negative value keeps increasing like that. So basically this side is negative x. So if I move in this direction, the positive side is getting more traction. So this is positive x. So if I say plus 2 and then press enter on my keyboard, so now you see the center of this cube, which is this orange dot. All right. First this was over here. Let me press Control Z, and then it was over here. Okay. But now it has moved 2 meters in the positive direction. All right. So this is how you can basically constrain your movements. Let me do that again. I press G to grab. So then the mesh basically uh, locks itself to the mouse cursor. Then I specify which direction I want it to move, X, Y, or Z. So I can change in the middle of the command also. X direction I want to move, or Y, or Z, or X again. So you can keep changing the direction if you want to. And then you can type in the value on how much you want to move it to. So I wanted to move it in -5. So it goes back in the -5x direction. So how do I know this is the x? So positive x is always solid red color. Negative x is hidden somewhere at the back. So it basically aligns with that. All right. So this is how you can move things around. Similarly, grab is for moving things. Okay. Oh, there's one other thing. While you're in the middle of a command and you feel like you don't want to go ahead with that command, you can press escape, and then it basically snaps back to wherever. Or you can press right click. So right click and escape are the same thing. Okay. G, oh, I don't want to move. Right click. Okay. Same thing happens with rotation. So rotation, it basically rotates your cube in many directions. You can again define you want to rotate only in the x-axis. So it uses the x-axis as the uh, rotation point, and then it rotates like that. You can use the y-axis also, or the z-axis also. All right. Same thing. And scaling. Scaling is basically it scales in all direction by default, but you want to scaling is basically multiplying the dimensions to some number in, and by default it multiplies in all directions. But if you only want to affect the x axis, so if you press X, it only becomes big and small in the x direction, Y and Z. Okay. So I right click, so I cancel the command. And one thing else you see is that this uh, orange dot right in the middle of the cube, right? That is the origin of this object. So every element has a origin point. Okay. For this light, the orange dot is right in the middle. Okay, so that is this light's origin point. You can, although this is not a mesh, like it doesn't have vertices or edges or faces, it is still an element in a 3D space. So you can still use scaling, uh, rotate, maybe in this. So this is a uh, origin point of the camera, this point over here. So you can scale the camera, you can I'm pressing S to scale. Okay. You can move the camera same ways, constrain it to X axis, Y axis, or Z axis like this. I right click to cancel the command, and then you can rotate it also. Cool. So this is how you can do things. Uh, so for the light, you can't do any of this. Like you can't scale a light. All right. You can't rotate this light, and you can't uh, scale rotate and but you can move this light here about, okay, by pressing G. There are so this is basically a spotlight. A spotlight will not have all these options, but some other lights will have some other commands. So we'll try to figure out all of this. Okay, so now we understood all of these things. So can we do this? So I put this over here. So can we do this like to manipulate the 3D object? Okay. So if I go select this and I go to edit mode over here, okay, there is a shortcut for this also. So I have come to uh, object mode. If you see, we're in object mode. So nothing has changed. If I click on some object, if I press tab on my keyboard, it is going to make me enter into the edit mode of that object. Okay. Let me go to an object. Let me show you another thing. So I want to duplicate this object and then paste it into this 3D scene. So how do I do that? So the shortcut is Shift D. So let me click on this. I'm going to press Shift D. So something has happened. My cursor has changed into the grab command icon. Okay. So now that I move, now you see there is another cube which has arrived in my scene. So basically, what Blender does is once you duplicate it, it automatically goes into the grab command of that second duplicated object. Okay. And then it basically asks you where do you want to put it. Okay. Then you can basically constrain it to X axis or Y axis, and then maybe say 5 and place it over there. Okay. So this is 5 units away from this. 1 second, let me just arrange my code. All right. So one thing that I wanted to show you is, let me grab this and let me try to intersect it by pressing X, G, Y, and G, Z. Okay. So I have intersected these two cubes into each other. But if I go into the edit mode of one cube, pressing tab, so and I go into vertex select mode on the top left, and let me go into uh, X-ray view. So there is an X-ray view also available for us to use. It is over here on the top right. Okay. So I can move individual vertices also. It is the same universal commands. Uh, G is for grabbing it. and then you can constrain it to x-axis, y-axis, or z-axis. I can right click to uh, uh, undo the command like that. But what I want you to see is, let me press this again. So if I manipulate one object, it doesn't affect the other object. Okay. So this is what object mode basically does. It will not interact with other objects. Okay, so we're hitting 1.5 hour mark. So I think we should start making a few objects. Okay, so delete is also very easy. Pressing X also deletes them. Let me press Control Z. You can delete by pressing delete on your keyboard, or you select an object, press X, and then it is going to ask you, do you really want to delete it? You say yes, I want to delete it. So yeah, there. So there is one other thing I would like to show is how to add objects. So in object mode, uh, because there is nothing to be edited, so you'll be by default you'll enter into the object mode. There is a add menu over here. So in add menu, you have so many things that you can add into your 3D viewport. Okay. The other way of calling the add menu is by pressing Shift A. It's the same add menu which is available over here. So instead of you moving your mouse to the top left like this, wherever your mouse is, you can press Shift A, and then it's going to give you the same menu. So this is a mesh. Like I told you, a mesh is basically consists of vertices, edges, and faces. So we can add a cube again, and yeah, your cube is there. And in the outliner also, you can see the cube has come. Uh, so let's say we have moved this cube somewhere. We have rotated it also, and then we have scaled it also. Okay. Uh, but I am okay with the moving part of it. I am okay with the scaling part of it, but I was not okay with the rotating part of it. I want the rotation to reset. So all you have to do is press Alt R, and then the rotation will get reset of this object. Okay. Similarly, if you want to undo the only the scaling part of it, you press Alt S. So the scaling part also gets reset. Similarly, pressing Alt G is going to bring this cube back to the center. Alt G is going to bring you back to the center. All right. I hope that makes sense. One other thing, when moving, like I've told you, pressing X, it is going to constrain it to the X axis. Pressing Y is going to constrain to the Y axis, or Z into the Z axis. But what if I want to constrain it to X and Y axis both and not in the Z axis? So how do you do that? Okay. So you can basically do that by pressing uh, shift, pressing G, and then you want to constrain it on in the like you don't want the Z dimension to change. You don't want this to move in the Z direction, for example. So if I press Shift Z, now you see, uh, I don't know if you are able to see it. Shift Z, sorry, G, Shift Z. So X and Y axis got highlighted. So basically what is happening, it is not able to change its Z dimension, but it is able to change its X and Y dimension. So if you see the top left also, like over here, see, locking global Z, it says, but dimensions of the x-axis and y-axis are changing. All right, but the Z is not changed. I hope you understand. So if you want something to move on the floor only, but you don't want it to move up and down, you can press Shift Z. Uh, like after pressing G, you enter into the grab command, then you press Shift Z. So it is going to lock itself to the floor like that. Similarly, G, Shift X. So y and z axis, that plane, it is going to constrain itself to that plane particularly. All right, cool. Now that we have that out of the way, let's make a simple table and get going with what we by making a simple this thing model. All right. One last thing I want to tell is that there is a origin of every mesh object. So let me add another mesh called a plane. Now the plane is also 2 meter by 2 meters. So it is in the middle of the cube. So you're not able to see, but it has been highlighted by this yellow, uh, this orange outline. So if I press G and move it about, let me constrain it to x-axis and move it about 3, I guess. Yeah, plus 3 and put it over there. Uh, cool. So this is like that. Oh, let me show you one other small trick. So if you press G, X, but you're not very sure how far you want to keep it, but you want it snapping to the grid. So you can press Control and then move your mouse so it keeps snapping. Okay. Remember during like if I open the tab, if you remember this, if I press Control, it starts snapping to things. So it's the same thing over here. All right. So basically, while you're in a command, if you press Control, it gives you that snapping ability. So yeah, so this plane and this cube, they have their separate origins. Okay, what is the significance of this origin is any changes, it happens with respect to that origin. That origin becomes the pivot point of that object. So even if I rotate it, it rotates, it uses that origin as the pivot point. All right. So remember this, every object is going to have its own origin. So let me delete this also, X and that. So let me add a plane. Okay. So I added a plane. Of course, this plane has a dimension of 2 meters by 2 meters. All right. So let me go into edit mode of this plane. So if I press tab, uh, I've entered into the edit mode. As you can see over here, we are in the vertex select. That is why we can see all these vertices. Okay. So let me select all these vertices by making a box around it. And then let me go towards extrude region. Okay. Now it gives me this option. I can click and drag it up and down. And yeah, it gives me a thickness. All right. The other shortcut to do this is, let me go here, is pressing E on your keyboard. E also gives you the same command. Okay. And then you can define how thick you want your table to be. So on the top left, if you can see, it keeps giving you the dimension, how big you want your extrusion to be like. So if I say I want it to be about 0.1, 0.1, I'm gonna type on my keyboard and then I'm gonna press enter. So yeah, so now you have a tabletop. I'm gonna press tab to go into object mode and you have a tabletop. Now I want this to move 1 meter above the ground. So let's consider this grid to be the ground, okay? Or might as well make a plane. So there is a plane, but it is right below the other one. So let me scale it by pressing S, and I'm going to scale it to be very big. And this plane is called plane point 001. So let me double click on it and type floor. Okay. So this will become our floor later on. And this is the tabletop, which is exactly on the floor. All right. So let me call it tabletop. Okay. So this is tabletop. And I want this tabletop to be 1 meter above the ground. So I press G, Z, and 1. So if you see the top left, it says 1 meter. I hope you can see that. Now I'm going to press enter. So it is 1 meter above the ground. Okay. So I'm going to hold this floor. It is a little distracting to me at the moment. So I'm going to uh, hide it. Okay. So you click on the eyeball icon. So it hides the floor. Now, any table, it will need some legs, right? So how do we get those legs? So first of all, let's add a mesh maybe. Let's add a mesh. Of course, we have to start with the primitives only. So let's start with the cube. Now you see, because the cube is 2 meter cube, uh, from this point to the edge of this point, it is 1 meter. And from this point to this point, it is another 1 meter. So uh, it is a 2 meter cube. What if I can delete the second half of the cube and then make that cube the leg basically? So basically, I need to manipulate this cube in a way where it becomes the leg of the table. So let me enter into edit mode of this cube by pressing tab. Now I want to delete the second half of this cube. I like the uh, like this is how I'm working. You can use your own method. Uh, so I'm using this method is because I find it very easy to do. So there is something called a loop cut. Okay, this is a new concept that I'm trying to make you understand. So Control R on your keyboard. So you enter into a mode called loop cut. So if you go close to any edge, it is going to give you a yellow line. Okay. If I go close to this edge, it is going to give you another yellow line. Okay. So, and then if you basically use your mouse wheel, when this preview is coming, you can basically see there are more loops occurring. So what this does, it divides the mesh into your desired number of segments. It has not yet divided it. Let me just go close to this loop. Let's say it is going to create a or generate a new topology or new information around that loop cut. Okay, I'll show you what it means. Basically, if you go close to this edge, I'm gonna press once, click once, and then confirm. Now now the cursor has like changed and it says, do you want to move up and down? So by default, it is moving up and down. Okay. So now in this particular situation, I am okay with it being cut right in the middle. So I'm going to press right click to cancel this moving command. Okay. Right click. So now you see there is some extra geometry which was not there before. Why did I create this? This is so that once I delete these four vertices, let me just delete it. 2, 3, 4. These four vertices I've selected. I'm going to press X to delete. Now, In edit mode, it is going to give you so many other options also after you press X. In object mode, it is going to ask you, do you really want to delete it? And then you say, okay. But in edit mode, when you're editing mesh, it is going to ask you, do you want to delete vertices, edges, faces? What do you want to delete? So I'm going to say vertices. All right. Now, what if I hadn't made these new geometry or this new information, all of this would have gotten deleted. Do you understand? Because I've made these new geometry, the delete action, uh, it got deleted and then only these are left. I hope that makes sense. Okay. Cool. But there is one thing, there is this gap right in the bottom. So this doesn't have a face between these four vertices. Okay. But we don't want our table legs to be hollow, right? We want them to look solid. So let me click, while pressing shift, I'm gonna press uh, close to all these four vertices and I'm going to make a face out of it. So if I press F, and now I have a face. Okay. F is for fill. Uh, the command is fill. All right. So I'm going to press tab. So now I have half a cube. All right. Half a cube. Now, this is cool. This looks like a half a cube, but the dimensions are way off. So what do I do? Uh, Let me scale it maybe. Let's scale it. So if you remember, every scaling, rotation, and moving, it happens from the origin point. The origin point is at the bottom of this cube, uh, uh, like in the middle of this surface. All right. So if I scale, let me just press S once. So it is scaling in all directions, but I only wanted to scale it in the X and Y direction, but not in the Z direction. Z dimension is fine. Z is supposed to touch the bottom of the uh, tabletop, right? But Z is also changing. So how do I constrain it? So I have to tell Blender that I want you to scale, but I want you to scale it in X and Y direction, but not Z direction. So the shortcut for that is Shift Z. Okay. So now it is scaling, but it is scaling in the X and Y direction. As you can see, the highlights are there. The X and Y dimensions, the axes are being highlighted, but Z is not highlighted. So that is not happening. Oh, and also you can see on the top left, uh, locking global Z, and it is telling you by how much factor it is scaling in the X and Y direction. So let's see, let's say 0.05 seems like a decent number, all right? 0.05, enter, all right. So great, so this is how it looks. Now, uh, there are tables which have only one leg right in the center, but I think what is going to make things complicated is if we move this a little bit to the right like this. So let's do that. For that, I will show you a command called snapping. So if you see this icon over here, it is a magnet icon. So if you click on it, so snapping is on. Okay. Now, on the right of this magnet icon, you have so many other options also. So where do you want to snap it to? Do you want to snap it to increments? Do you want it to snap it to vertex, edges, faces? So you have to tell Blender where do you want this snapping to occur. So if I say increment now, because this is a 2 meter by 2 meter, and this point of the uh, table corresponds to this point of the grid. Okay, because this is 2 meters, right? From here to here, it is 2 meters, and from here to here, it is also 2 meters. So it is exactly corresponding to this. But to be on the safe side, let's call it vertex. Okay. I want to snap to vertex. So I'm gonna go close to this. I'm just gonna hover. Okay, I'm not doing it. I'm gonna press grab and I'm going to go close to this vertex. Okay, it is going through here and there. As soon as I go close to some vertex, it's going to get snapped to that. Okay, so I'm going to snap here, and that seems like a decent snap over there. Cool. Now I want the same thing to happen over here, here, and here also. So do I make the cube again, or do I just copy paste this? So obviously I'm going to duplicate this in all the other places. Okay. So I'm going to press, whilst I have selected this leg, I'm going to press Shift D and duplicate it. I'm going to right click and then leave it there. So what has actually happened? There are two objects over here. You see, there is cube and there is cube dot 001. Let me show you. Let me just move this around. So there are two. All right. I have right clicked so that I escape the command. So I'm gonna enable snapping again. I'm gonna hover close to this edge. I'm gonna press G. I'm gonna go close to here and then place it there. Cool. I'm gonna press Shift and select two of these objects. All right. And then I will press Shift D. Snapping is still on, and then place it over here. And yeah, that is your table right over there. Cool. So your table is 2 meters by 2 meters. If you want to see the dimension of your leg, let's go to the dimension tab. Snapping is already on to uh, vertices, so you don't have to press control anymore. I'm going to press this. So 0.1 meters, that is 100 centimeters. All right. This is how it looks. And let's add a few textures maybe onto this. So let me show you how to see this thing. Give me 1 second. All right. Adding textures. Okay, that is another uh, rabbit hole in which we are going to go into. Uh, Adding textures is a little tricky. So I'm gonna show you how to do that. So if you click on an object, because this is a mesh, it is going to have its own set of preferences, like properties over here. So this one, right below the second last one, is of material uh, properties. Okay. So every object can hold multiple materials, but then you can select which material it shows. So this first window that you see is how many materials can that object hold. Okay, so I'm going to click the plus icon. So it is going to create a drawer or a file in which the materials are going to be put. I can make multiple of these, all right? But I'm going to make only one for now. And then in that file, I'm going to add a new material. So this material would be called wood. Yeah. And you can maybe change, so preview, it is not required. In the surface menu, if you see, let me just show you. There are so many settings, all right. We are not going to go through all of that. We are just going to go into the surface settings. And then on the base color, We're going to click on it once. We're going to go to this kind of color, and but you see there's no color changing happening over here. So this is a good time to show you what 3D viewports are. One second. Uh, okay, 3D viewports. So these are render properties. So this is called a wireframe a viewport shading. So this is solid, this is material, and this is render. All right. Uh, if depending on your laptop, if you have a weak laptop, uh, you should be working in like 3D like solid viewport, solid mode. Wireframe is when you can see all the meshes in wireframe format. So if you see the X-ray view, which is right here on the left, it is automatically turned on. You can turn it off also. So it looks somewhat like that. Okay. You won't be able to see through it, but if you turn it on, you'll be able to see through it. Is the same thing over here. And you can turn on X-ray vision to see the other side of the thing also. But you can only see the materials in material viewport. All right. That is, you have to be on the third or the fourth one. Uh, so in the material viewport, you can basically select materials. Now, of course, this is one object, right? This object name is tabletop. Now, this is the leg of the table, right? But we can rename it by pressing F2, table leg. I'll call it leg 1. I click on this, F2, leg 2, leg 3. All right. So tabletop has something called a wood texture, which we just created. So that wood texture is nothing but a base color, which is of this color. And if we press on leg 1, we can. So every time you create a new material, it will always be present. Okay, you don't have to keep creating the same material all the time. So if you press on leg 1 and then press wood, so you keep giving it materials like that. Make sure you're in the material tab of the properties. Okay, that gives you a simple table. All right. Oh, let's not forget that there is a floor on which we are uh, putting this table, right? So this floor also needs a material. So let's call it, I'm created a new file for the material uh, of the floor. Let's call it new uh, floor material. And let's put gray there. Okay. Let's see through the camera and see how the table looks at the moment. Looks all right. Okay. Uh, now there is okay. Now we have entered into render viewport. Okay. Material viewport, it does not use lighting as such. It is only to show you that which mesh has which material associated with it. But if you want to have like a rendered image to come out of your Blender work, so if you have to go into rendered uh, viewport and then change the settings according to your preferences. So let's see this. Okay, this looks all right. So there is shadow. Now the shadow is only there is because we did not delete the camera and the light source. All right. But what I see is the shadow is a little okay. That's fine. So let's. Uh, so how do you enter into the camera view? So you can click on the camera. You can right click, set active camera, and the first option that comes there, and then it's going to take you to the viewpoint of the camera, or you can click on this button, which is on the top right. Okay, and then you go into render. You will say render image, and then it is going to basically render that image. You can then save this image. Okay, you have to save. So I'm gonna save it on desktop, untitled PNG. So here you can basically change which format you want it. That's called JPEG. Uh, it's called table.jpeg, and save as render, save copy, RGB 90, save. And that is how you save an image as a render. So this is a basic way of how you can basically create your so whenever you say render image, it's going to open up new a new windows, which is basically rendering that image. Okay, and yeah, this is how it looks. So I'm gonna close this now that the image has been rendered, and you can save this. Always keep saving. All right, you can save this if you want to, and yeah, that is how you can make a table and basically render your image. I hope this has been useful. I'll stop sharing my screen at the moment. All right, guys. Thank you so much for staying so patiently. It's been 2 hours. It's a little too long. I thought it did get a little in depth, but there are multiple methods where you can learn Blender very easily. But this might be very long, and like a lot of things have been touched upon. But yeah, it's a little difficult to in like get a hang of how things work in Blender. But use shortcuts. Get associated with shortcuts from the very beginning, because that is going to reduce your uh, time a lot, and uh, it is going to give you a much more better workflow. So I will hand over this table to Gargi, my associate, and then she can take over. Yeah.
Hello everyone, that was a wonderful session by Madhu. I hope you all liked it. Do you all have any questions? You all can unmute yourselves at this point. We can have a quick Q&A. Um, I'll give you all a couple of minutes. If you all don't have, then I've posted a link in the chat. This is regarding our virtual museum competition, and you can go to the link and find out more about the competition over there. The virtual museum competition is a mixture of history with Blender and 3D modeling. And whatever you've learned here in this technical session, that is being spread across. Only thing is, it is for grades 7th till 12th. So whether if you all are belonging to that age group, or if you all have any other people that you feel might be interested in it, please pass on this link to them. Other than that, I will be shortly posting, like in a minute, the quiz link. Do attend the quiz so we know how much of the session was actually, useful to you, in the sense the amount you were able to grasp, because it was a lot of information over a short period of time. So here is the link that I'm posting. you can attend this quiz. Make sure you complete it within 10 minutes because we shut it exactly in 10 minutes. And any questions if you want, we can take them while you all do your quiz.